He let out a cough at the office, and blood spilled onto the palm he used to cover his mouth. His heart skipped a beat as he stared at the red stain. A wave of fear swept over him. "What is happening to me?" he muttered under his breath. Gbenga quickly grabbed a tissue from his desk, wiping his hand as discreetly as possible. His colleagues didn't notice, but his chest felt heavy, both physically and emotionally. That evening, after work, he decided to visit the hospital, but little did he know his life was about to take a turn for the worse. At the hospital, the doctor ordered several tests. Gbenga sat nervously in the waiting area, his mind racing. He was the breadwinner of his family, a dedicated father to 3 children, and a loving husband, at least, so he thought. He couldn't afford to be sick. Hours later, the doctor returned, his expression grim. "Mr. Gbenga," he began, his tone laced with sympathy, "your results show you have tuberculosis. It's treatable, but you must begin treatment immediately and take precautions to avoid spreading it to your family." Gbenga's hands trembled as he held the prescription paper. Tuberculosis? How could this happen to him? He left the hospital feeling like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. His thoughts were clouded with worry. How would his wife react? What about his children? He knew his community in Lagos wasn't forgiving when it came to illnesses like this. When Gbenga arrived home, his wife, Sade, was in the kitchen, and their children, Deji, Tai, and Kunal, were glued to their phones in the living room. The smell of egusi soup wafted through the air, but Gbenga didn't have the appetite to eat. He called his wife, Sade, into the bedroom to break the news. "Sade, I went to the hospital today," he started, his voice low and hesitant. "Hospital? Why? What's wrong with you?" Sade asked, already sounding impatient. "The doctor said I have tuberculosis," he revealed, avoiding her gaze. Sade's face twisted in shock. "Tuberculosis? Huh. Gbenga, how did you get that? Do you want to infect me and the children?" she snapped, stepping back as though he'd suddenly become a danger. "Sade, please, calm down. The doctor said it's treatable. I just need to take my medication and—" "Treatable or not, don't come close to me. I don't want to catch anything from you. We have children to think about," Sade interrupted, her voice rising. She stormed out of the room, leaving Gbenga standing there, stunned. That night, Sade called their 3 children together to inform them about their father's condition. Instead of compassion, their reactions were filled with disgust and fear. Deji, the eldest, was the first to speak. "So, what happens now? He'll just be coughing all over the house." "Exactly," Tai cut in, her nose wrinkled. "We need to be careful. I don't want to get sick." "We'll have to set boundaries," Kunal added, nodding in agreement. From that day, Gbenga's life at home became unbearable. His family assigned him a single plate and cup, which they insisted he wash separately. They moved him into the smallest room in the house, a dim, stuffy space that felt more like a storage room than a bedroom. Meals became unpredictable. Sometimes they brought him food, but other times they claimed they forgot. When they did remember, it was often cold leftovers or scraps. Gbenga, who had once been the head of the household, now felt like an outcast in his own home. One evening, Gbenga overheard Sade talking to her friend on the phone. "I don't know how long I can keep this up. Oh, Gbenga has become a burden. Imagine a man with tuberculosis. How am I supposed to cope with him and still look after my children?" Tears welled up in Gbenga's eyes. He felt like a failure. He had worked tirelessly to provide for his family, sacrificing his own happiness for years to ensure they had a comfortable life. Yet now, in his time of need, they had turned their backs on him. His situation at work didn't help matters. Gbenga's boss, Mr. Okoro, noticed his declining performance and frequent absences due to hospital appointments. One morning, he called Gbenga into his office. "Gbenga, we've been patient with you, but it's clear you're not in good health. We can't afford to have someone in your condition affecting productivity. I'm sorry, but we'll have to let you go." Gbenga's world crumbled. Losing his job was the final blow. Without an income, he couldn't contribute to the household, which only worsened his family's resentment. Sade, who had always relied on him, began to complain bitterly about the financial strain. "How do you expect us to survive now?" she yelled one evening after he informed her about losing his job. "You're not only sick but also useless. What kind of man can't even take care of his family?" Gbenga said nothing. He simply sat in silence, his chest heavy with shame and sadness. He spent his days confined to the small room, staring at the walls and reflecting on how drastically his life had changed. The once vibrant man who had dreams and ambitions was now a shadow of himself, broken and despised by the very people he loved the most. Despite everything, Gbenga held on to hope. He continued taking his medication and prayed fervently for healing and for his family's hearts to soften. But each passing day felt like an eternity. The isolation, the lack of affection, and the constant reminders of his worthlessness wore him down. One night, as he lay on the thin mattress in his cramped room, he heard his youngest son, Kunal, laughing in the living room. The sound reminded him of happier times when the house was filled with love and laughter. Back then, he and Sade worked together as a team, and the children looked up to him with admiration. Those memories felt like a lifetime ago. Tears streamed down Gbenga's face as he whispered to himself, "Is this how it will end? Alone and unloved?" Gbenga's sickness grew worse with each passing day and had spent almost all he had treating himself that he now stopped visiting the hospital often. The cough became more frequent, and the blood he spat out after every fit of coughing now stained not only his hands but also the edges of his pillow and his shirts. His body felt weaker, his legs trembling under his weight as he moved around the house like a shadow of himself. His family had all but abandoned him. The love and care he once gave so freely were now denied to him. One Sunday morning, Gbenga lay on his thin mattress, his chest rising and falling with effort. He could hear the voices of his wife, Sade, and their children getting ready for church. He mustered the strength to call out, "Sade, please. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I need to take my medicine." Sade, dressed in her bright Ankara gown, paused in the doorway. She looked at him with a mix of irritation and pity. "Gbenga, we're running late for church. I'll see if we can bring something back for you," she said, her tone dismissive. Gbenga stretched a hand toward her, his voice breaking, "Please, at least leave me something before you go." But Sade had already walked out, calling for the children to hurry up. Within minutes, the front door slammed shut, and silence filled the house. Gbenga was alone again. His stomach growled painfully, reminding him of the food he hadn't eaten since the previous morning, a few cold slices of yam and watery stew. He reached for the small plastic bag where his medication was stored, his hands trembling. The doctor had emphasized the importance of taking the drugs consistently, but how could he when there was no food? Gbenga's vision blurred as he lay back on the mattress, tears slipping down his cheeks. His thoughts wandered to his children, Deji, Taitai, and Kunal. Once, they had been his pride and joy. Now, they avoided him like a plague, their faces filled with disdain whenever they saw him. Gbenga's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp pang of hunger. He couldn't bear it any longer. He needed food, anything to give him the strength to keep going. Slowly, he dragged himself off the bed, leaning heavily on the wall for support. His chest ached with every breath, but desperation pushed him forward. He thought of his ATM card, only to remember that it had gone missing 2 weeks ago. He had overheard his children whispering about using it to buy something online, but when he confronted them, they denied it. Now, with no money and no food, Gbenga felt truly helpless. He shuffled to the front door and stepped outside. The sunlight stung his eyes, and the dusty streets of their Lagos neighborhood seemed unusually quiet. He knocked on the door of the first house he came to, hoping to find help. "Please. I need some food," he said weakly when the door opened. The neighbor, a plump woman with a wrapper tied around her chest, recoiled when she saw him. "Gbenga, what are you doing here? You should be resting," she exclaimed, stepping back. "I haven't eaten. I need to take my medicine," Gbenga pleaded, his voice barely above a whisper. But as soon as he coughed, spraying droplets of blood onto the ground, the woman shrieked. "Ha! Don't come near me, oh! I don't want your sickness," she cried, slamming the door in his face. Gbenga's heart sank. He moved to the next house, and the next, but each time, the reaction was the same. Some neighbors gave him pitying looks, others scolded him for not staying indoors, and most ran away when they saw him cough. Gbenga's head spun with shame and exhaustion. Was this what his life had become? As he leaned against a wall, trying to catch his breath, a familiar voice called out. Gbenga, what are you doing outside? He turned to see Aunty Rose, their single neighbor. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a soft voice. Aunty Rose was known in the neighborhood for her generosity, though she often kept to herself. Aunty Rose, Gbenga croaked, his voice breaking. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I need food, please. Aunty Rose's face softened with concern. Come, let me get you something, she said, gesturing for him to follow her to her small apartment. Inside, Gbenga sank into a chair, his body trembling from exhaustion. Aunty Rose moved quickly, placing a plate of rice and beans before him, along with a glass of water. Eat slowly, she cautioned, watching him carefully. Gbenga's hands shook as he picked up the spoon. The first bite brought tears to his eyes, not just because of the taste, but because someone had finally shown him kindness. Thank you so much, he whispered between bites. Aunty Rose sat down across from him, her brow furrowed. Gbenga, you need to take better care of yourself. Have you been taking your medicine? I try, but there's no food most of the time, Gbenga admitted, his voice filled with shame. Aunty Rose shook her head. That's not right. Your wife and children, what are they doing? Why are they treating you like this? Gbenga looked down at his hands, unable to answer. How could he explain the pain of being abandoned by his own family? He finished the meal in silence, his chest aching, not from sickness, but from the weight of his reality. As Gbenga stood to leave, Aunty Rose handed him a small bag with more food. Take this. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask me, she said firmly. Gbenga nodded, tears streaming down his face. God bless you, Aunty Rose. I don't know how to thank you. Just take care of yourself, she replied, her tone gentle yet serious. Gbenga returned to his small room, clutching the bag of food like it was a treasure. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. But deep down, he knew this was just the beginning of his struggle. His family still treated him like a burden, and his illness showed no signs of improving. As he lay back on his mattress, he prayed silently, asking God to give him the strength to face whatever came next. Gbenga lay quietly on his thin mattress, savoring the taste of the rice and beans Aunty Rose had given him earlier. For the first time in a long while, he felt a small measure of relief. The warmth of the food had settled in his stomach, easing the sharp hunger pangs that had plagued him for hours. His body was still weak, his chest heavy, but at least he could take his medication. He closed his eyes, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks for Aunty Rose's kindness. Meanwhile, Sade and the children had returned from church, their voices filling the house as they moved around. Gbenga could hear the sound of pots clanging in the kitchen. The smell of fried fish and jollof rice wafted through the air, teasing his senses, but he didn't feel the same desperation he had felt earlier. It was nearly 3 hours later when Sade finally came to his small room with a plate of food. She didn't bother to knock, she simply pushed the door open and walked in, holding the plate like it was an offering. Here, eat this, she said curtly, setting the plate on a small stool near his bed. Gbenga sat up slowly, his body still aching. He glanced at the plate of food, then back at Sade. I've already eaten, he said quietly. Sade's eyes narrowed, her brows furrowing in confusion. What do you mean, you've already eaten? Who gave you food? She asked sharply. Aunty Rose, Gbenga replied, his voice steady but tired. She gave me food earlier. I'm fine now. Sade's mouth fell open, her shock quickly turning into anger. Aunty Rose? That woman? What business does she have giving you food? She demanded, her voice rising. Gbenga sighed and leaned back against the wall. Sade, I was hungry. You left me here without anything to eat. She only helped me because I asked her. You're shameless. Sade snapped, her tone dripping with scorn. So you're going around the neighborhood, begging for food now? Do you want to embarrass this family? Gbenga said nothing. He simply closed his eyes, trying to block out her harsh words. He had no strength left to argue. Sade stormed out of the room, Fuming, she marched straight to Auntie Rose's apartment, her slippers slapping angrily against the floor. She banged on the door, her voice loud enough to echo through the compound. "Auntie Rose, open this door." The door creaked open, and Auntie Rose stood there, her expression calm but curious. "Sade, what's the matter?" she asked, folding her arms across her chest. "What's the matter?" Sade repeated, her voice high-pitched. "How dare you give my husband food? Who asked you to interfere in my family's affairs?" Auntie Rose blinked, surprised by the outburst. "Sade, your husband came to me because he was hungry. I didn't think it was a big deal to give him food. He's sick and—" "Exactly." Sade cut in, raising her hand. "He's my husband, not yours. If he's hungry, I'll feed him when I'm ready. Don't you ever give him food again. Do you hear me?" Auntie Rose stared at her for a moment, her face a mixture of pity and disbelief. "Sade, with all due respect, your husband is suffering. He's your husband, the father of your children. How can you let him go hungry in his condition?" Sade pointed a finger at Auntie Rose, her eyes blazing. "Don't preach to me. Stay out of my business, or you'll regret it. This is your final warning." Auntie Rose shook her head, her voice calm but firm. "Sade, I'm not trying to interfere. I only helped because he needed it. But if you want to fight me for doing what's right, that's your choice. I won't apologize for showing compassion." Sade hissed, turning sharply on her heel and storming back to the house. Her anger was palpable as she entered, slamming the door behind her. The children, who had been in the living room, looked up from their phones, startled by her outburst. "Mummy, what happened?" Deji asked. "That nosy Auntie Rose." Sade spat. "She had the audacity to give your father food. Can you imagine the insult?" Tai rolled her eyes. "That woman likes to act like she's better than everyone else. She should mind her business." "Exactly," Kunal added, nodding. "She's always looking for a way to interfere." Sade shook her head, still seething. "I've warned her. If she tries it again, she'll see the other side of me." In his small room, Gbenga could hear every word. Each comment felt like a dagger to his heart. He couldn't understand how his family had become so cold, so distant. Were these the same children he had raised with love and discipline? Was this the same woman he had married with dreams of building a happy home together? The loneliness in his chest grew heavier. Gbenga's thoughts drifted to Auntie Rose and her simple act of kindness. She had shown him more compassion in one day than his own family had in months. He wished he had the strength to defend her, to tell Sade she was wrong, but his body was weak, and his spirit felt crushed. Later that evening, Sade returned to his room, still brimming with anger. "Don't ever go to that woman again," she said, her tone cold and commanding. "If you're hungry, you wait until I give you food. Do you understand me?" Gbenga didn't respond. He turned his face to the wall, letting her words hang in the air. His silence only seemed to fuel her anger further, but he didn't care. He had nothing left to say. As night fell, Gbenga lay in the darkness, his mind restless. He thought about his life before the sickness, when he was strong and respected. He thought about the love he used to feel in his home, the laughter that once echoed through these walls. Now, all he felt was emptiness. And yet, amidst the despair, a small spark of hope remained. Auntie Rose's kindness had reminded him that not everyone had turned their back on him. Somewhere in the world, there were still people who cared. Gbenga sighed, his breath shaky. "God, give me strength," he whispered into the quiet night. "Help me through this." The rain started in the early afternoon a few days later, a heavy downpour that soaked the streets and sent neighbors indoors. Gbenga lay on his thin mattress, his stomach twisting in pain from hunger. He had not eaten since the day before, and his body felt weaker than ever. His cough had worsened, each fit leaving him gasping for air. He stared at the cracked ceiling, tears welling up in his eyes as he thought about his life. The man who once provided for his family now lay forgotten, like a discarded object. From the kitchen, he could hear the faint clatter of pots and pans. The aroma of frying plantain and stew drifted into his small room, making his stomach growl even louder. He knew Sade and the children were eating, but no one had come to give him even a morsel. Gbenga's vision blurred as his hunger gnawed at him relentlessly. With trembling arms, he pushed himself up from the bed. His legs felt like they were made of lead, and his chest ached with every breath. Slowly, he crawled toward the door. The rain outside pounded against the roof, the sound almost drowning out the noise of his labored breathing. He opened the door to his small room and dragged himself into the corridor. The journey to the kitchen felt like crossing a desert. Every inch of movement drained what little strength he had left. When Gbenga finally reached the kitchen, his hands clutched the edge of the counter as he tried to pull himself up. His eyes scanned the room desperately, searching for anything he could eat. A few empty pots sat on the stove, and crumbs of bread were scattered on the counter. Gbenga reached for them, his hands shaking, but before he could touch anything, a voice pierced the silence. "Daddy, what are you doing here?" Tai stood in the doorway, her arms crossed and a frown on her face. Her phone was clutched tightly in one hand, and she looked at her father with a mix of irritation and disgust. Gbenga turned to her, his voice weak and broken. Tai, I'm hungry. I just wanted to see if there's anything I can eat." Tai's eyes widened with anger. "You're not supposed to be here. Mummy said you should stay in your room," she snapped, stepping closer to him. "I haven't eaten, please, just a little food," Gbenga pleaded, his voice cracking. But Tai wasn't moved. Instead, she grabbed his arm and pulled him away from the counter. Gbenga, too weak to resist, stumbled and fell to the floor. Before he could recover, Tai dragged him toward the back door. The rain was still pouring heavily outside, the wind howling as water splashed against the walls. "You can't stay here, Daddy. You'll make everything dirty," she shouted, opening the door. Tai, please," Gbenga begged, his voice barely audible. "I'm your father." But Tai was unmoved. With one final push, she shoved him outside. Gbenga fell to the wet ground, the rain immediately soaking through his clothes. He lay there for a moment, shivering and coughing violently. Behind him, he heard the door slam shut. Tai had locked him out. The rain poured down mercilessly, drenching him as he struggled to sit up. His body was too weak to stand, so he crawled on his hands and knees, the mud and water clinging to his skin. His heart ached, not just from the hunger and cold, but from the realization that his daughter had treated him like a stranger, like someone unworthy of love or respect. As he crawled through the compound, his thoughts turned to Aunty Rose. She was the only person who had shown him kindness, the only one who seemed to care whether he lived or died. Gbenga's hands and knees ached as he made his way to her apartment, the rain blurring his vision and chilling him to the bone. When he reached her door, he weakly raised a hand and knocked. His strength was almost gone, and his knocks were faint, barely audible over the sound of the rain. For a moment, he thought she might not hear him, that he would collapse there in the rain and be forgotten. But then the door opened. "Gbenga!" Aunty Rose exclaimed, her voice filled with shock and concern. She quickly bent down and helped him to his feet, her arms strong despite being a middle-aged. "What happened? Why are you out in this rain?" Gbenga tried to speak, but his words came out as a hoarse whisper. They threw me out," he managed to say before another violent cough shook his body. "God forbid," Aunty Rose cried, pulling him inside. She led him to her sofa and helped him sit down, his clothes dripping water onto the floor. Without a second thought, she grabbed a towel and began drying him off. "You're shivering. Let me get you something warm to wear." She disappeared into her room and returned moments later with a dry wrapper. She wrapped it around him, her hands gentle but firm. "Wait here," she said, heading to the kitchen. Gbenga leaned back against the sofa, his chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. He felt a lump in his throat, not from the sickness, but from the overwhelming emotion of being cared for. Aunty Rose returned with a steaming cup of tea and a plate of yam and egg sauce. "Eat this," she said softly, setting the plate on a small table in front of him. "You need to regain your strength." Gbenga looked at her, his eyes filling with tears. "Aunty Rose, God will bless you. I don't know what I would have done without you," he said, his voice trembling. "Don't talk like that," she replied, her tone gentle but firm. "You're a human being, Gbenga. You deserve to be treated with dignity. I don't understand how your family can abandon you like this. Gbenga shook his head, unable to find the words to explain. He picked up the spoon and began eating slowly, the warmth of the food spreading through his body like a balm. Aunty Rose sat beside him, watching him with a concerned expression. You need to rest, Gbenga, she said after a while. You can't keep living like this. If your family won't take care of you, then I will. Gbenga looked at her, the tears spilling over. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. As the rain continued to fall outside, Gbenga felt a flicker of hope. In the midst of his suffering, Aunty Rose had become a beacon of kindness and humanity. But deep down, he wondered how much longer he could endure this life of rejection and pain.